Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Stiglr for the Details. My name is Alan Dickerson, known in some wargame circles as Stiglr. We're going to continue on our um, tutorial series for Flat Top, and in this installment, we're going to talk about weather. And we're going to be, as always, using our Vassal module to illustrate gameplay in that. So it's going to be a little bit different than what you get when you are playing flat top using a physical copy. But I think Vassal is definitely a way that flat top is improved in just the physical nature of how you play and its effect on things. But anyway, let's get started by opening a new scenario. We'll just say we're going to assume Coral C and going to enter as observer. And we're not going to start a log file. And we're going to click the map button. And now we get the map. So this is a representation of the flat top physical map that the players share to show units that are common to both players on the map. Obviously, whether physical or in a vassal version, each player will have their own set of displays where they will secretly plot what's going on and all of that. But this represents everything that is visible to both players. You'll also see a bunch of these aids to set up, which are showing various zones that the Japanese and American players will set up in, or they may delineate hex edges that they have to enter from, and all these things can be removed before start after the player set up. But anyway, we are talking about weather here. So for flat top, there are two types of weather conditions, general weather conditions that determine where clouds will be set up on the map. The most common by far is the scattered clouds option. And what you do for that is you'll notice here that we have these cloud markers that are placed in each of the map's 4 sectors. The scenario will tell you how many clouds are set up in each sector, but it's usually 4. Also note this wind directional marker, which determines the prevailing wind and the direction that the clouds will move during the game. But before the clouds can move, you have to set them up. So first I will show you how a front is set up. And then I will move on to the more common scattered clouds. Okay, so if you have a front, you set up you set up your clouds in a line so that they are separated by 5 hexes. And let's see here. And basically, you have a line of non-overlapping clouds in a row. Let's see. Actually, it says right. Okay, so you set these up in a row on the axis of 2 to 5, as you can see here. These are directional numbers that correspond with a die roll. So you set these up, and actually, the rules say that you set up 3 of these. So 1, 2, 3 in the 2 to 5 axis. And then you roll a die, and you locate them by rolling one die and moving all 3, a number of hexes equal to the die roll in the direction that equals the die roll. So in this case, we would roll the die, and this would be a 4. So 4 is directly south, and so we would move all of these in unison. 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes. I moved 4 in that direction. And this is where the clouds will be set up. Then, in even number turns, that is, turns that are divisible by the number 2, the clouds will move 1 hex in the direction that the scenario states the prevailing wind is. So this is turn 1. So then on turn 2, and on turn 4, and on turn 6, and on turn 8, etc., you will move the clouds in the direction of the prevailing wind. Every 4 turns, so on turns 4, 8, 12, you also check in each sector to determine whether the direction of the wind changes. And this is done before you actually move the clouds. You roll a die, and if you roll a 1 through 4, the wind direction doesn't change. If you roll a 5, the wind direction changes counterclockwise. If you roll a 6, the wind changes clockwise. That way. And then you would say move these 3 in 1 hex to the south. That's how clouds are determined to move as fronts. But most of the scenarios use the scattered clouds method. And again, this same procedure would be done here in sector 2 and also in sectors 4 and 3. Actually, I think this map, the greater flat top map actually has 6 sectors. So you would do clouds in each of the 6 sectors. I know the midway scenario is based on 4 sectors. So anyway, for as many sectors as your map has, you will set up the clouds. Now, let's see how the scattered clouds um, method works. And I'll also detail a couple of problems I have with the way it is done. First, let's move the prevailing wind out of the way because it's definitely going to get in the way. What happens with a scattered clouds setup is that you start with 4 clouds markers in the same hex, which is the wind direction hex in each sector. Then, after you do that, the rules say that you simply roll a die, one die, and move each of the cloud markers in the direction and also the number of hexes indicated by that die roll all at once. So, for instance, if I roll a die here, 1, I would move the first one hex in the one direction. Then I would roll for the second of 4, and that one's a 5, so I would move that 2, 3, 4, 5 in that direction. Then I roll for the third one, I get another 1, and here's the problem I have. This is going to create a storm in that area. And then for the fourth one, I roll another one and I get another 5. So now we have the Vassal die roller doing its usual clumping of results, and we actually end up in this sector with 2 storm patterns where we basically have 2 overlapping cloud formations in the same area, as you can see here. I will explain how this affects gameplay in a second, but the problem I have with this is that I think for each cloud counter, you should roll the die twice, once for direction and once for the number of hexes that it goes. So, now this is a house rule that I use because I think it creates these perfectly overlapping storm fronts from occurring. So I'll move all of the clouds back into the center, and I'm going to redistribute them again. So the first one I'm going to roll twice, and I get a 6 and a 5. So direction 6, 5 hexes. I'm going to take the first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then for the second one, I'm going to roll the dice twice, and I get 5 and 4. So now I get 5, direction 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes. For the third, I'll roll 2 die, and I get 1, 6. Now I get direction 1, but 6 hexes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for the final cloud, I roll twice, and I get 6 and 4. So my direction is 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I get a more interesting pattern. I still get a storm, but it is not perfectly overlapping, which is what you get when the direction and the number of hexes is the same. Now, let me also show you some subtleties in what it is that you're seeing here. A cloud formation affects the hex that the cloud is in and out in all directions for 2 hexes. So you can see with this, clouds are in all of these hexes out to 2 hexes. That's clouds. The effect that that has in the game is that if a task force is in any of these hexes and it is searched for, the die roll um, for a searching air fleet is there, 1 is added to that roll if that search plane enters a cloud hex at any point in its search routine. So let me fish out, for example, a pieces. Let me fish out a Japanese oh, this is bad. Well, it appears that our module is set up so that a observer does not have visibility to the other player's side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to retire. I'm going to switch to Japan. There. And now I should be able to, there we go. Drag this on. Okay. Now, if let's rotate this. Let's see. Rotates. Just uses these. Okay. If at any point during its search phase, this plane enters a cloud hex, 1 is added to its search roll. And as we might learn in a different segment of the tutorial, anytime you search or you move a searching air formation, you then roll a die. And under normal conditions, if you roll a 6, such as I have just done here, or a 5, you will see nothing, no matter whether you flew directly over a task force or not. You will see nothing. So clouds turn that roll into a 50-50, because then it is 4, 5, or 6. You will see nothing. If you have a storm, which is this area in here, where you have 2 or more cloud areas that overlap, so you get this darker storm. This has a number of effects. One is air formations may not enter a storm, and if a storm should, say, move in the cloud drift segment over a cloud formation that is in a hex, that formation must, by the quickest available route, move out of that storm to avoid it. Also, if a task force is in a storm area, they can stay there if they wish, but they cannot conduct any air operations. So they cannot launch or recover any aircraft. So if you've got aircraft that are returning from search or strike missions, then you're going to have to move your task force out of that storm before you can recover any of those planes. So, let's see, is that it for weather? I believe it is. Let's see here. Okay. Movement effects. Planes can enter a storm hex. Okay. Expedient route. Also, units in a storm hex cannot be observed. So, a task force may, if it is not conducting any air operations, they actually might move into a storm hex and hide. The other effect is if a task force is being shadowed, so the enemy has successfully um, located it by a search and then has left a air formation nearby or in the hex to shadow it, the number for shadowing is also modified by 1. And normally, shadowing is successful with a 1 through 5, with a 6 meaning shadowing is unsuccessful. If the task force is within clouds, then the shadowing unit that must roll every turn to continue its shadow will fail to shadow on a 5 or a 6. Obviously, if the task force is in a storm, then the shadowing task force at best could only, say, be in a cloud hex adjacent to where the task force is in a cloud hex. Okay, let's see. Here's an interesting rule that okay. Here's an interesting rule that affects the wind formation. Rule 6.10 states that carriers and carrier lights must move 1 hex into the wind during movement in any turn in which the number of air factors that land or take off exceeds the ship's minimum launch factor. And a carrier or carrier light that only moves 1 hex from a maximum of 2 hexes of movement, or does not move at all, is assumed to have moved into the wind. So that's a small tactical consideration that you have to move into the wind, which is opposite the prevailing wind direction, in order to improve takeoff and landing conditions during the turn. So that's something that players have to watch out for when they're kind of in the heat of battle. And also, if you're attempting to evade enemy search patterns that are kind of boxing you in or whatnot, sometimes if your idea is to recover aircraft or launch a strike, you may be forced to move in a direction that is, for searches, not completely convenient, but you could, say, stay put and try to fake out a searching player's patterns by not moving. But the wind does have a tactile effect on what it is that you're doing. So there's a brief tutorial on wind, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Click like, subscribe, all that stuff if you've enjoyed it. And come back for other tutorials on flat top if the mood suits. And we'll see you next time.